People in the Philippines are used to working through the night and working opposite of what we would call normal. And if you're sitting there with like, am I being cruel by doing that?
We launched in 2019, right before COVID hit, and I had 80 people, and all of a sudden COVID hit, and I couldn't go there for 3 years. And so I'm a testament more than ever.
Are we like replacing somebody that we would have had here? And I think in almost every instance, we're doing more.
And as all know, right, the world of outsourcing and offshoring and virtual assistants and AI, right? We all know it exists, but the question is like, how does it actually work? How are small to medium businesses actually implementing this world into their business?
Oh man, it's a little overwhelming today. Guess what? This is the best it's going to be, because I don't know anybody who doesn't operate in a little bit of a state of overwhelm in most of life today.
Well, welcome everybody. Hope you're ready for another high impact, high takeaway episode of how outsourcing and AI works for small to medium business, looking at the whole world of growth, profitability, and scale for the SMB market. And as all know, right, the world of outsourcing and offshoring and virtual assistants and AI, right? We all know it exists, but the question is like, how does it actually work? How are small to medium businesses actually implementing this world into their business? And so here on this episode, we'd love to dive in we have clients, we have non-clients, we have thought leaders, and fortunate enough to have Dustin Campbell with us today, who falls in both of those categories. Had a chance to work with CultureWise, which we'll kind of dive into and talk about his journey and path from an entrepreneur standpoint, and the opportunity we've had to have a huge impact in supporting their business, I think going back to 2022. So I have quite a bit of history of supporting them in their journey and the phenomenal product and service that they're delivering, because as cliche as most people want to say, the phrase of culture eats strategy for lunch, I mean, it is valid as ever, particularly in the current world that we're in from an AI standpoint. So Dustin, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for having me, Brad. Nice to see you.
So as always, let's start our episodes off, right? If you get nothing else from what we'll be talking about here in the coming minutes, is to share a quick tool or resource, what we call our addictive tools section, where I ask myself and my guests to kind of share maybe a non-mainstream, book, tool, resource that they're using that's kind of adding value to their day, personally and professionally. So Dustin, maybe go ahead and share what you and I were talking about at the beginning on the latest that you're using.
Yeah. So I don't know how, not mainstream versus mainstream it is. I feel like I see all these things in my feeds and I don't know what's just micro-targeted to me versus everybody else. But we've incorporated the use of the Plaud note-taking devices into a lot of our workflows when we're doing client delivery. I use them personally in meetings and whatnot. And I'm definitely old enough to remember what it was like to have to take notes by hand, but I don't mind letting the virtual tools do it, and it's just pretty phenomenal how well it works in an in-person setting for relatively large spaces. So I find it pretty useful.
Yeah, and I'll show it here. I mean, we don't have any affiliate arrangement or anything with Plaud. Probably should with all the tools that we share, but anybody's watching the video version of this, I'll show, but this is their website. And what's really cool, a lot of people is, so yes, it has the Plaud pen, the physical device that you can put down. It also has one that attaches to your phone. But whether it's, business meetings, I'm in a group called EO, Entrepreneurial Organization, and YPO, and we have forum meetings. So sometimes we'll put it in the room to be able to kind of share when people are doing presentations. You're going to conferences, and I recently was at a conference for Keller Williams. We're doing a lot of work in the real estate space, and like Gary Vaynerchuk and Donald Miller spoke. So I just had the Plaud device and recorded it, turned it into great infographics and visuals. So huge advocate for that tool. And a lot of people realize too is that it actually has a web app. So if you actually see on my screen here in the top right, this is actually Plaud recording, right? It'll record all of your Zoom meetings and everything else. So it's actually got a web-based interface plus the actual physical device. The cool thing is how it'll render. You can choose different templates that you can put the notes through, I think. So anyway, when Dustin told me he was sharing this one, I got a lot of experience with it as well. But I think we've mentioned in the past, but it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, for relatively short dollars, it can bring a lot of efficiency.
Yeah, and you can set up all kinds of automation. So as soon as everything records, it automatically triggers and goes into my inbox, and the VA goes through and scans it. And then it can turn it into content too. Like, so this will actually be recorded. And so it'll actually pre-create. We have a template that'll put it through and take our conversation and turn it into already pre-made posts that we can break our interview into, micro sessions.
No, I've not actually done that. That's great.
Yeah, it's a bunch and I'll send the file to you so you can have it as well. And we can both share things that are out there. Well, very good. So Plaud, you can check that out, plaud.ai. And one I'll share real quick is Suno.ai. And this is a tool I was sharing with Dustin. that I coach my kids in softball and baseball, and it's all about the walk-up songs, right? The kids all about, what walk-up song, and then, all the team moms or team dads had this thing called walk-up DJ. They play 15 seconds while the kids walking up. And so I actually use this to make a custom AI song for my kids for their walk-up song. And so for my son, it's called Braden the Bomber, and it sounds phenomenal. Like you would never know this not in a live band that was made. The same thing for my daughter. And then we made a whole team song as well for the Gators and for the Diamondbacks. And actually, I'll put a link in the show notes. People can check out and listen to it. But I mean, unbelievable quality sound.
That's great.
Custom AI music. And I mean, I know people that are actually creating digital AI artists on YouTube and Spotify. You can publish it. So they've been so popular that we created. So I'm actually going to publish this on Spotify and make it kind of be a walk-up song playlist option that people can pull from. If their kids are named Ella and Braden, which, So, two quick tools you can take advantage of and explore. We'll put in the show notes. So, Dustin, turn back to you, and thanks again, for this journey. And audience knows kind of on our path. I've been 25-year entrepreneur, built a bunch of different companies, and my current business we started. We're in our 7th year anniversary actually this month for Outsource Access. That committed to building an offshore experience out of the Philippines, truly to make it sustainable for small to medium business in the United States. Based on the quality of people that we bring on and how we train and onboard and integrate them and working with our clients. And so love to, share the journeys that people have gone down with that path and their business, and sort of where they began and where the constraints were, and then what it's been like working with offshore teams and how it's integrated, right? Because the questions that people have around this, what about competency and time zones and communication, and how are my, existing employees going to respond to it, which we'll kind of dive into. But Dustin, love you to kind of give just a quick recap of your journey. People always love to hear the entrepreneurial stories.
Sure.
So you can kind of give a recap of sort of where you started and quickly those milestones that led to where you are with CultureWise.
Yeah. Started my career in finance. A couple different firms. After business schools, did a little management consulting, and then joined a pretty large private equity firm. One of my best friends now for over 25 years. He and I both overlapped at that PE firm for a number of years, and on the operations team and in the portfolio of some of the companies that they owned. And after about 10 years of doing that, we realized we were at a different phase in our life and wanted to do something a little more entrepreneurial. So we bought our first company in 2015 on our own. Ran that business for about 8 years. Exited it at the end of 22. And our whole goal had been to sort of, take some of the lessons that we had learned in our journey through private equity and really build an operations playbook that we could repeat and go and scale. Right at the end of that journey, we got introduced to a book called Culture by Design, which became our favorite book on culture that we'd ever read. We were a little bit bummed that we got introduced to it like literally right at the end of our journey, because it had some key ingredients to the full sort of culture recipe that we had been missing. We had a lot of the ingredients, but we hadn't really put together the recipe the way the author David Friedman and our CultureWise founder had. And it was a series of just fortunate circumstances. We launched a company called Persistently. We took about a year off after we exited that first company and launched a company called Persistently to help productize some of the things that we've done in our careers and the operations playbooks that we've built. And we knew culture was just so important in making sure that, especially in today's world where almost every business is becoming commoditized more and more quickly, the key differentiator that you have is your culture. And if you're a growing company, almost every company I ever talked to or I've been a part of is, sort of hits a stage where once the leaders, the executive team isn't interacting with everybody directly anymore, there's that proximity to leadership, the cultural transmission can sort of break down. And David built a system that is by far the best that I've ever come across in terms of like, how do you really implement this? And it was about a year and a half after we launched Persistently, through a series of just really fortunate circumstances, we got introduced to David, and he was looking to, exit the company. He actually wasn't exiting the company. He wanted to exit ownership. He's still very passionate. He's still with us. He's our chief evangelist. He's just an amazing human being, amazing business leader, thought leader. So now he gets to do a lot more of what he loves. He just mostly he's on airplanes a lot, and he goes around and he's giving talks to people and educating people on how to build just really exceptional cultures. And so now we're taking over, running the business day to day. And we still have Persistently, so they're sort of very complementary. So that's sort of our journey now. We just had our 1-year anniversary with CultureWise. So, and we've got some exciting things that we're going to be doing here going forward, but it's been awesome working with members of your team along the way, and I'm excited to talk about that.
I appreciate it. Well, thanks for sharing the journey and a lot of dynamic things that you've been executing. Yeah, I can see, how these dovetail very well together. For a quick tactical takeaway, give everybody a little bit of a nugget on Persistently. This adaptive scaling, method sort of. You mind like just briefly highlighting kind of just this quick methodology in terms of how you guys developed this concept here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's like a lot of things. It's been evolving, and I'll be really frank. When we started our journey, in private equity, I'm aging myself here a little bit, but that was coming up on 20 years ago. The concept of like a business operating system kind of popularized in the small business world through, most notably through Traction, but scaling up and the Rockefeller habits and whatnot. I think was still just sort of pretty early in that journey. It certainly hadn't made its way into private equity. There's, if you kind of go up the scale of sophistication, you get up to like the Toyota production system or, the Danaher business system and whatnot. These are all on a continuum. And I'd love to say that like ours is completely novel and it's completely different. And they're frankly not. They're how do you systematize the running of your business? We have some particular nuances in the way that we do it. We think we have, through CultureWise, the best culture solution to it. We also think the main thing that Persistently is doing is we're really focused on how do you build your middle management layer in a similar fashion to how CultureWise builds the culture layer. There's a lot of people that are doing the sort of quarterly executive planning sessions through EOS and whatnot. And if you're using one of those, awesome. If you're not, you should, or contact us. We're happy to help. But the culture component and the middle management component like really help systematize the things that we see missing in the market. And once you have those things, once you have the executive planning, the culture, the middle management, then you can really get your operations and your strategy humming. Because if you don't have those things in line, you do a lot of work. And this is where, as you were saying, culture eats strategy for, breakfast, lunch, it is
snacks.
Yeah. And I always say that can kind of cut both ways. If you've got a great culture, it'll eat up your strategy and ask for more. And if you don't have a great culture, it'll eat up your strategy and spit it back out at you. And, so it really matters, like getting the right core components of your infrastructure in place. And as you scale past that place where, you have that direct line of sight to all the employees, that's where it starts to become, necessary to really think about systematizing.
And I love the fact you're zeroing in on that middle management layer. And I think you can have all the systems and frameworks and so forth that you want, but unless you do have the right people in the right seats and know how to develop them in the appropriate kind of way, nothing matters. And I'm a huge fan. I'll pull up here for those people that don't know, Jim Collins, we all know about the books and stuff that he's written and what have you, but very few people know, and you may, Dustin, the map, right? That takes all his concepts from all his books and puts it into this tight framework, right? Which is ultimately about disciplined people with disciplined thought, disciplined action, be built to last. And I'm telling you, for anybody, we still send this to all of our frontline staff. And in 20 minutes, if you go on here and watch this, in 20 minutes, Jim Collins gives a masterclass in 22 minutes, basically 40 years worth of research of all his books in this tight framework. I think it's one of the most timeless things produced from a business.
I've actually not seen this. This is great. I've read a couple of his books, but I think that's the thing is what we're big fans of. And Brad, you probably lived this is there's no one system that has to be the system, but you have to make sure you have your system. And so we're really focused on, a lot of companies, like we work with some companies that have run EOS, for example. We're like, great. Yeah. But then they scale sort of past the place where EOS, the toolkit sort of, goes to a certain level. and then we can help build on from there, because the commonality between them is really similar. The language used can vary, but I love that. I'm definitely going to check out the Jim Collins website. I hadn't seen that before.
Yeah, most people have no idea that it exists. That he takes. I mean, it takes all the concepts, the hedgehog concept, the flywheel, the bullets for cannonballs, and puts it into this tight framework with discipline, people, thought, and action. And you click on each one, and it kind of has a short little snippet video and short article about that exact thing. So if you don't want to read all of his books, which on my last podcast, actually, his most recent one is called "What to Make of a Life," and it's the first one he's done from a personal standpoint that I highly recommend to check out. It follows the same decades of research that he does, from a personal standpoint, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks for sharing the kind of journey that led to where you are, and so kind of learning back into the whole world of how we ended up, connecting and supporting you on the outsourcing BA front. I think, it goes back to 2022, and got a chance. And when David came through Atlanta,
predates me.
He spoke for our EO chapter initially. I'm trying to recall, our Vistage, one of the two that you spoke was a thought leader, and we ended up connecting. And then I just love what he had built. And honestly, it was one of our, in our earlier days, we were growing. He actually gave me some wonderful feedback, because look, we're nature of business. I had no idea I was going to launch a business on the other side of the planet, right? And grow to 500 people in 4.5 years and 85 industries. So it's been to the point of systems and processes. I've been a living, breathing, journey of this. We launched in 2019, right before COVID hit, and I had 80 people, and all of a sudden COVID hit, and I couldn't go there for 3 years. And so I'm a testament more than ever. And EOS was honestly one of the ones we chose, because there was an EO member, there was an EOS implementer, the only one in Southeast Asia that I got who helped me do EOS, helped us weather the storm of me. I was growing 40 employees per month for 2 years straight, and president of the EO Atlanta chapter at the same time. So it was, but to the point of culture, right? And as you and I talked about, right, we were fanatical from day one with, have our own company magazine and celebrating our employees. Because our journey with it is all about as much celebrating our staff and who they are and their background and their journey, and that helps you attract the best talent that then translates into sustainability, retention, and a great experience, for our clients. So maybe kind of walk us through sort of what the journey has been through your eyes, right, of how we intersected, and what your journey and experience has been working with our team. And maybe share some of the specific things that you found value in. And I always talk about this journey as kind of, there's a little bit parallel in AI, right? Where it's sort of, people know that this exists, but not sure where and how it's going to apply. And you gotta build confidence in it, right? And sort of unpack things, and then it kind of snowballs as you begin the journey. So maybe kind of just walk us through from your lens, kind of what that path has been like.
Yeah. So I maybe start even, because I've been with CultureWise for a little over a year now. And so, as you said, your team has been working with us for longer than I have. So I sort of stepped in and learned specifically about your team and how they operate. And it's been really wonderful. But I think, many companies were sort of forced during the pandemic to learn how to operate remotely. Whether it was with, W-2 employees or through, 1099s or outsourced employees, however it worked for them. We had started, our first company was a video collaboration company. So we had a lot of remote people long before the pandemic. And we had really put a lot of thought into, like, how do we make sure we bring people on and they understand and they feel like a part of the team. And so if you've learned some of that through the process, it's not that much different. I would say there are things that you have to sort of, as a human being, you kind of got to get yourself comfortable with the fact that, like, people in the Philippines are used to working through the night and working opposite of what we would call normal. And if you're sitting there with, like, am I being cruel by doing that? And just recognizing, like, that's just the way the market is set up, and that they're doing that. If you don't need them to work asynchronously, then you have a broader pool of people that, you can choose from. Or sorry, if they don't need them to work synchronously, if they can work asynchronously. But I think the thing that is, I think a lot about, and I was telling you, I have a friend who has a similar service providing company. And, I think a lot about this idea of, are we like replacing somebody that we would have had here? And I think in almost every instance, we're doing more than we would have otherwise done. I don't actually
Yeah.
know. I mean, I have a number of friends who use outsourced service providers and or offshore service providers, and it's almost always the case. They're just like pulling work forward that it would have taken longer to do, or they just would have gotten less done. And it's really phenomenal because the world has a lot of. I mean, the world is pretty amazing over the last 20 or 30 years in terms of how much we've learned about each other, how much a lot of the cultures have blended. And so, working with somebody in the Philippines today is really not that much different than working with somebody in Illinois. Um, and so I look at it from the standpoint, as long as you can treat them like a regular employee and make sure that you feel like, hey, they're going to fit, they're going to be a part of our team. And then just the rest of it just kind of becomes the sort of natural, like, are they in the right meetings? Are they doing the right things? Now, if they're the only employee that you have that's remote and the rest of your team is still local and co-located, then you're on a slightly different journey because you haven't already gone through that learning curve. And
Right.
so there's ways to be really thoughtful about how to include remote employees. And I just encourage people to, do some of that. I mean, obviously we're happy to talk about it and help. I know you guys probably have a lot of resources and tools to help people think about that, because the more they're integrated into your team, the more you can learn some of their capabilities and extend it. And I'm a big believer that humans, they want to be helpful. And, I know, like, Anna from your staff who works on our team, I think I don't know what the original like onboarding for her was, but I think she came on as like an executive assistant, but she's capable of so much more and does a lot of other things. She drafts content, she organizes our podcast, she brings people, she reviews and edits. She's a fantastic writer. So you get to know like a little bit more of like what they're capable of, and people want to be helpful, they want to be useful. So it's really been a wonderful journey. I'm happy to dive more into details, but I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate, and that's why I love people just sharing, because everyone looks at it through a different, lens, and, from your background and experience. And, like you said, I appreciate where your entry point was, is like, are we replacing people here of things? And that's one of the things I always tell people, right? Because that's one of what I call the DFCs, doubt, fears, and concerns people have about this path of like, oh, we just shipping jobs overseas. Well, no, in reality, it's, we have this 2-question exercise that we actually do that actually touches on that, which I'll share. And anybody that's listening, you can just send an email to tools at outsourceaccess.com and just put CultureWise in the subject line, and we'll send you a copy of this as well. And we'll put in the show notes. But it's crazy. Just these 2 simple questions is where we start, where the constraint points are in an organization. And it's very much in you guys appreciating, acknowledging culture. The byproduct of this surprised me with existing employees of the culture lift, because they felt heard. And I started doing these 2 questions. I would do consulting with companies before we launched Outsource Access, and I'd help them figure out their constraint points. And the questions are just simply, what are you currently doing that you don't feel is the best use of your time? What is it? And how many hours per month are you spending on it? Right?
Yeah.
Simple enough question, but it's amazing how many people in organizations have never been directly asked this. What is not the best use of your time? What is not in
Yeah.
your genius zone? Where are you not adding most value? Where are you not happy? And then put a pencil to it, right? And that's the part we would have people do, because people start this and they're like, oh, I'm not going to put that. I don't spend that much time. I'm like, no, just if you think of something, take a minute. And it's amazing. We've done this with thousands of companies now, from startups to,
Yeah.
we did this with a $300 million pharmacy with 70 locations as a client of ours with 6 staff. And the CEO kind of laughed at me. He's like, 2 questions. He's like, I've had every consulting firm in the world in here. They always had these long surveys. I'm like, trust me, 2 questions.
Yeah.
And if you ask people, what are you doing? And saying, and you got to give them psychological safety to tell you things they don't think are the best use of their time, right? And say, hey, look, you're here for a reason, and I just want you to be in the place that you love the most. But you got to put time to it. And then secondly, what are things on the radar that you want to be doing, or you think we should be doing as a business that we aren't, due to time,
Yes.
money, or knowledge constraints?
Yeah.
2 simple questions. And we literally tell owners, because sometimes clients will come with us and they already know out of the gate some things that they want. But a lot of times they're trying to explore where are the other constraints we're dealing in the business. And at the end of the day, back to the thesis of, let's get everybody to their genius zone. I mean, humans want to wake up every day, ideally, and do the things that they love doing the most. And how do we get to that path? And these 2 questions, what do we get off your plate? And then what are the things you want to be doing more of? And and copy and paste, send it to managers, and people are blown away by like how much response they get. That one CEO of that pharmacy, I mean, that woman been with them for 8 years. She came back with 42 items on that list. And
Yeah.
he's like, Jane, you've been with me for 7 years. I had no idea. Well, you never really asked me. Um, so we give
I
them
think,
like 700 tasks they can scroll through. And these are like, we've done 5 million hours of work over the years. And so
oh, wow.
like, hey, if you need some ideas brainstorming, you scroll through these 700 ideas on marketing and sales and exec admin and so forth. But normally I don't show this as kind of the end, but you hit right on to the point of, right, understanding what they're capable of. And it's about elevating your existing people, right,
Yeah.
to where their highest and best use and their genius zones are. And this is a great journey to just help them be able to do more and add more value, where it's a one plus one equals four type of experience.
Yeah. Well, I know you're thinking about this through both the lens of outsourced help as well as AI, because
Yep.
everybody's trying to figure this out. But what I love about what you're highlighting there is you just got to get thoughtful about your workflows, and then and where I maybe somewhat selfishly think, like, our component in that is that every leader, I think, in the next, probably forevermore. There's this quote that one of my partners, brought up recently, that the pace of change today is faster than it's ever been, and it's the slowest it will ever be again. And where people are sitting here today feeling like, oh man, this is a little overwhelming today. Guess what? This is the best it's going to be. Like, so you got to get not just yourself like okay with that, and as leaders, we got a lot of work to do, sort of like internally, to manage the emotional impact of that just for ourselves, because we got to carry that energy forward into the organization, and we got to help the team get used to there's going to be a lot of change continually. And if we don't have a good way that we communicate about how we work through change and the challenges and things like that, we're going to lose out to people that do. And so part of setting that baseline is getting that workflow right, and then really coming back to it in a somewhat methodical way on a regular basis and saying, is there a better way that this could be accomplished? Is there a different way that we should be doing that, given what's changed with the technology or the capabilities of our overseas staff and things like that? Because every company has to be healthy first and foremost. If you're not a healthy company, nobody wins in the long run. And so that's a framing we use a lot with leaders to talk to their employees about this, is to say, look, first and foremost, my job as a leader is to make sure that we're a healthy company. And as we navigate thinking about how do we do things in the most effective way so that we serve customers, keep them happy, make sure that we are maintaining, all of the attributes of a healthy company. Nobody wants to work for an unhealthy company. That's a lot more stressful. I've worked for a number of them before, and it's just a lot more stress in everybody's life. So I think like getting those workflows right is so essential. And then just knowing like what's the right way to do this so that we can go do the bigger and better things and serve customers even better.
Thanks for sharing that. And that's, reflective of kind of how we look at it across the board too, and working with businesses and getting a chance to see across 85 different industries and seeing every different type of management and leadership and culture, kind of across the board. That's kind of the lens you really have to look at it now. And it's actually, now more than ever, with all the change that's happening, right, and how rapidly it is occurring. It's got to be a conversation you got to revisit on an ongoing, type of basis, right? Not just
Regularly.
one off, but ongoing and revisiting this. And that's why we encourage like this 2-question exercise. Like even if they never outsource or get VAs or do AI or whatever, this is a great exercise
I love
to
that.
do in any business, because it gives voice to your staff. And what I was saying in the beginning about the culture lift is just, it's, I wasn't expecting it, but like the feedback that our clients would get from the owners, the managers that would send these questions, like, I mean, they felt heard, right? And they got
Yeah.
insights that they never would have gotten otherwise.
Yeah.
In doing it. We had one client that it was somebody from the marketing department, on that second question, what do you think we should be doing? And she ended up sharing, something had nothing to do with marketing. It was about the HR, onboarding process, right? Because
Yeah.
like she had been onboarded and it wasn't an ideal experience.
Oh,
Another woman who was an admin shared about they think that they should go into the St. Louis market for their business. And the CEO's like Jane, like you don't touch anything on sales. And like, where did that? Well, my husband's a consultant and he knows our business and we talk about it at dinner at night. And like, he's been telling me for a long time, he thinks we ought to do that. And this is why. And nobody ever asked me. So
That's so great. I love that. No, it's
so
so
it's,
right. I'll say like I think there's a few like really consistent things that I hear from executive teams, that we work with, and almost all of them say they're too in the weeds. They're working, they're being pulled down into the business, and often, it's firefighting or whatever, and they don't feel like they have enough time to think strategically, and relatively small investments to find just a few hours a week across a few different folks or whatnot can make a really big impact, on quality of life, on the quality of, preparation, planning, execution, things like that. It can have a really, really significant impact for people, because I don't know anybody who doesn't operate in a little bit of a state of overwhelm in most of life today. We're just bombarded by so many opportunities, and almost every business has become hyper competitive. And so just the need to like constantly be getting better and better is so crucial.
well, thanks again for sharing kind of the insights around that. And I think you and I could probably talk quite a bit. Sounds like we both share a passion on ultimately just optimizing and getting things to their kind of full potential. So
For
if you
sure.
reflect back on just I know you kind of joined in the last kind of year, but your interface, um, with our team, if there's any couple of specific tactical things that you can share that you've interfaced with, specific examples, not to them breach any confidentiality or things that you're kind of navigating with clients, um, but any specific examples of some things, and maybe some things that did, create lift or get things off specifically other key staff's kind of plate that they can kind of reposition their time.
Yeah. So, a big part of what we do with customers is we create content that helps reinforce the fundamental behaviors that we help them, define, that drive success in their business, so that we're feeding it to their employees over and over again. And so we have a fairly big content library around a lot of these principle based or behaviors, or what we call fundamentals. But you have to keep it fresh. You have to update it. You have to do things, over time, and work with people who might want certain things customized and whatnot. And I know, Enna from your team who works with us has been just phenomenal at helping our team tackle some of those things. Like I said, I wasn't here when she was originally onboarded. I don't think that was a part of the original job description, but really understanding like that was a capability that she was able to bring really ups the quality of the service that we're delivering. Because she's, like I said, I think if I remember correctly, I think she's a history major, and she's done, a fair bit of writing, in her prior career, and it's just been really helpful to have somebody who's thoughtful, who thinks about these things. She fully participates with our team. She still does, sort of a lot of the travel coordination and whatnot. We have a lot of people who travel a lot for speaking engagements and for client engagements. And so she's, very instrumental in that, but she can really go a lot further than, a typical executive assistant, can. And I think that's just been really helpful. And she's also just wonderful to work with. She's like smart. She asks great questions. She's, comes with ideas. I mean, like I said, I don't, I know she lives in the Philippines, but we're a fully remote company anyway. And so, it doesn't really feel that much different to us, for her, as a part of the team than it does for anybody else. And so that's really been wonderful. She's a great asset to the team.
No, that's great to hear them, and that's a lot of the journey we find a lot of times we kind of share with people when they're they're identifying the key things that they want kind of a staff to do and what have you, and we they get stuck on, well, they need to have X number of years experience in this and this. I'm like, look, you don't understand, right, how fast and quick and adaptable our team members are, right, and the hunger and desire they have to learn. And I talk about one of the key things we look for when we recruit staff is we want people who are fast learners, good communicators, and can take feedback, because a lot of the stuff that we're doing, it's not necessarily rocket science per se. It just takes somebody who's willing to learn quickly and adapt and have
Yeah.
a thirst for learning and growth. And our core values, ode to Jim Collins, spell the word great, right? cliche as it is, but it's, gratitude, relationship driven. E is everlong quest, for learning, right? And then
Love
A
it.
is accountability, and T is teamwork. Um, and so it's always growing and learning. And we invest $30,000, $40,000 a year just in learning platforms and tools to continually invest in the training and development of our staff, for clients. So they want them to do things that, they hadn't necessarily done before, that the speed they can get up to, execute those. And I was having my team kind of summarize and just to kind of give a sense, right, of kind of as Dustin's talking about with their staff with us, right? We've got, executive support and logistics, communications management, tech and product support, content and social media, podcast coordination, sales and implementation operations, some financial and accounting assistance. So kind of gives you like a cross section, right, of the kind of like types of things that she's having a chance to support you guys. It's a pretty wide breadth. And you ask most
Yeah.
people, they're like, one person can kind of do these things. I'm like, well, none of these individually are like, but these are process driven things. And if we can collaborate together to get the process and protocol defined, you can have a single person that can coordinate and do these different elements, right?
Yeah.
Being collaborated on.
I think one of the big things that a lot of I mean, this is sort of part and parcel to, again, some of the work that we do is it sounds to me like you're similar, but I'm a big fan of, really the modern era of psychology and the impact that it's having on how we think about teams, leadership, building great organizations. And I think we have to like remember that it's relatively early, in that journey. And one of the things that we really focus on, and we just wrote a new edition of David's book, and we added a chapter on the science of why it works. And a big part of it is this evolution, in what we've learned in psychology, but this concept that I'm pretty fascinated by, the fundamental attribution error, where we attribute the good work that's being done to the person. And what you just, I think, highlighted, we talk about it from a cultural standpoint. How do you pull the behavior, the way the person is behaving with their teammates, away from them to make it clear what you want with everybody else? Because everybody has some of those employees that they wish they could clone. And that's like an exercise we walk people through, and we're like, what are those people doing? And we help them get really clear on the behaviors. Similarly, it's analogous to what you're doing on the process side, which is, what are those things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis? How do we pull those away and say, we can teach that to somebody else? But oftentimes people are like, oh, well, that's just, Susie's just good with the customer. She just knows how to fill out the forms, or whatever. And you're like, yeah, but Susie could probably do other things with the customers too, if we can just take a little bit of an investment in time and write down what is Susie doing when she's filling out the sales forms that maybe isn't the best use of her time, because she's so good with the customers. Let's go have her talk to more customers more regularly. And then we can elevate that without having to magically go find more Susies, that sort of thing, I think is really important.
No, those are all, exact examples right in the crosshairs of sort of where we see value being added. And it's about having an open mind. And it is crazy how parallel a lot of this is to the AI journey and BAs, and then the power of bringing the two together as well. And we're training all of our staff in AI tools and platforms, and how do you help them understand the tools and train them. And Jim and I, we're Google Workspace business in terms of how we're operating, being able to elevate and educate them on how can we use AI to even do more and offer more efficiency and insights. And so with our account managers, we do these strategic advisory meetings with our clients, and kind of share exactly where's our opportunity where we can support in a broader way in the business than typically. And so like this is like an example. I'm sure you've seen like these, Dustin, like these are this is a made up one we were took out for confidentiality purposes, but it's like looking at, hey, what did we do? What do we commit to doing? Right? What are the KPIs of how we're going to perform and deliver value? How did it execute? And then using AI, like really analyzing. So we're in the middle right now of building out a very robust, deep, comprehensive, expert AI agent team for every industry that we're in. So imagine taking the Jim Collins equivalent for every industry. Who are the top thought leaders, the top podcast educators in every industry, and then building that out as an expertise team that then we're able to run and cross against the work we're doing with clients, and then be able to provide strategic advisory plan. I got a national franchise we're working with. I was on the executive team. This company's been around for, 30, 40 years. and live on there produce an entire rollout strategic plan with every bit of detail, reverse engineering it for a competitor that they have to map it to their model and exactly how to do it in a 30-page document. And
Yeah,
so it's being both advisory and staffing kind of at once to kind of help them along, with the path.
that's really great. That's impressive. I mean, I'm really excited to see where you could take that, because I think with the breadth of the industries that you guys are covering and being able to like learn and go deep, I think there's just like a new model. I think I mentioned early, I spent a year at Boston Consulting Group. And so I got a little taste of
Yeah.
like big level consulting. Um, and obviously that whole world is blown up over the last 30 years and is continuing to evolve and whatnot. But, I learned quite a while ago, I love working in sort of the lower middle market or smaller companies where your span of influence can be a little, uh, you can get a little bit more done a little bit more quickly. And,
Right.
and but I love that some of these tools, they're in this early wave of being able to help smaller companies really professionalize and systematize things in ways that, it was just not easy to do 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And I love the way in which you guys are sort of pursuing that and thoughtfully applying those things.
Well, I try. I mean, just being like myself, right? It's kind of like anytime we do a business, it's like, well, what would I want if I was, buying this service, right? And at the end of the day, I can't imagine like offering an offshore staffing company where we didn't create playbooks and document every single thing that we're doing for our clients. So we create these
Yeah.
playbooks and document everything. So we have redundancy and then do performance business reviews and try to kind of integrate that in. And to your point about, the software side of it, we found like 150 software applications that we were running for our clients, whether it's Restaurant 365 for the restaurant industry or,
Yeah.
Worky actually just had their CEO on my podcast with 100,000 customers. And, small, medium businesses struggle. Like even software, as great as it is, it still takes somebody on their team to run
Oh
it
yeah.
along with all the other stuff they have. So we've ended up building, like this is actually at our office in the Philippines when I was there last and shooting videos for our teams. Like this is a whole team that does nothing but run workies for small and medium business in the home and commercial services space in the United States.
That's
So
great.
that they can focus on their business, and then we have dedicated teams that know how to run it and execute it for them. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how this is sort of evolving, and you see where's the opportunity to create the most lift for people in their organizations.
Yeah, you have the ability to really to bring some breadth, not breadth and depth, I guess, but like really to be able to say, hey, we've seen this within your industry and in your space, and we understand some of the pain that you guys are probably living with, and I think that's really right. We've talked about that a lot because my partners and I, obviously we have some friends who work in large companies, and they're like, there may be in a lot of large companies, I think maybe some jobs are being replaced by some of the technology and whatnot, but in smaller companies there just isn't that scale, and you got to use the modern tools, and there's just not the scale because you don't have a team of 50 people that are managing your ERP system. You might have one, you might have two, or something like that, and having some additional people that are really knowledgeable within those tools for your specific business, for your specific space, that maybe can even bring some other insights that your team hadn't thought about, is really crucial.
Yeah, I mean, you'll appreciate it from consulting, with BCG, and that's what we ended up seeing is that there's a lot of this amazing software that these companies run, but just their employees, have a million things on their plates. They never use but 10% of what it's capable of. And when that person leaves, that knowledge walks out the door, then the new employee has to be brought up to speed on it. And then all the new features that they're releasing never get used because they're trying to still do the first, 10% that they weren't able to optimize. So we're like, you know what?
Totally right.
We're just going to build a whole team of people who live and breathe this all day, every day. And then,
Yeah.
they're having to pay for the software plus pay us to run it. But when you squeeze all the juice out of it, it takes it to, kind of another level. So we're building teams out that are just nothing but experts on Restaurant 365 and House Call Pro and Service Titan. I think it's an interesting niche to fill that we weren't kind of anticipating. So
yeah, that's great.
Dustin, thanks so much, man. It's been amazing here. Thanks for sharing. And we had a little bit of a latency with some tech, with some internet challenges here. So hopefully everything kind of came through for everybody. We'll try and clean it up in the editing piece of it. But I want to share here a key takeaway, and we'll put the link in the show notes here. A culture without walls, a guide for remote and hybrid leaders, which could not be more significant than today. We'll put the link to it in the show notes. But a guide that they have that you can kind of go download. They got a bunch of great resources on CultureWise.com and Persistently as well. I mean, encourage you to go. We'll put links to both of their businesses there and what they offer. But this is a great downloadable guide. I think that can be a great help for exploring this whole new world of the hybrid remote workforce, right?
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, thanks for taking the time here, Brad. Really nice to chat with you.
We'll put it in email tools@outsourceaccess.com, put CultureWise in subject line. We'll send you that 2-question exercise document I was sharing with Dustin at the beginning and kind of help your journey on redefining how you scale. So thanks again, Dustin. Appreciate it. And look forward to continue seeing your journey ahead.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it.
Take care.